Which CPU is better in a laptop, the 6700HQ or newer 8550U from Intel? We'll find out in this video with a series of benchmarks to see how they perform and discuss the differences between them to help you decide which you should get or if it's worth upgrading. I recently compared the 8550U against the 7700HQ in another video, and had a few comments asking to also compare it with the even older 6700HQ, so here we go. Late last year, Intel launched their 8th generation of mobile processors known as Kaby Lake R, which were a refresh of the 7th generation known as Kaby Lake, rather than being Coffee Lake based. The mobile Coffee Lake chips are on the way, but for now we've only got the U-series and desktop processors, and the 6700HQ CPU is from the 6th generation known as Skylake. First, let's note the similarities between these two mobile chips. Both have 4 CPU cores with 8 threads, which is the main reason that I wanted to compare them, and both are based on a 14nm manufacturing process. That's where the majority of the similarities end. So how do they differ? The main difference is that the clock speed of the newer 8550U varies quite a bit, with a base frequency as low as 1.8 GHz and a turbo boost up to 4 GHz, while the older 6700HQ has a 2.6 GHz base and 3.5 GHz turbo speed. This is because the 8550U is a lower powered chip with the 15W TDP compared to the 6700HQ's 45W, and its performance greatly depends on how much power is being applied as well as the cooling solution. The Dell XPS 13, which I'm testing with here, is configured to use up to 25W though, so in general it does perform better than many other 8550U systems. The 6700HQ also has 6MB of cache, while the 8550U has a bit more at 8MB. So there are some interesting differences between the two, mainly with the clock speeds and of course the power difference. How much of a performance difference does this make practically? To test this, I've run some CPU-specific benchmarks on 2 different laptops with these processors to find out. Both laptops are running Windows 10 with all available updates installed on an SSD. The 6700HQ laptop has 16GB of DDR4 memory running at 2133 MHz, while the 8550U laptop only has 8GB of LPDDR3 at 1866 MHz. So a small amount of the performance difference may be due to this difference, and is worth keeping in mind. Overall, the laptops aren't too different in terms of specs. We should still be able to compare the CPUs for the most part. In Adobe Premiere, I've rendered my Asus Zephyrus gaming laptop video, which goes for around 10 minutes at 1080p, using the H.264 high bitrate preset. No GPUs were used for this test. These results are CPU tests only. We can see that there's a fair difference between the two, with the 6700HQ able to better handle sustained multi-core speeds. Next, I've used Handbrake to encode a 4K video file to 1080p and a separate 1080p video file to 720p, and in both cases the 6700HQ has taken the lead by over 10%. I've used VeraCrypt to test the AES encryption and decryption speeds, and in my testing the 8550U performed a fair bit better than the 6700HQ in both. The 7-zip benchmark was used to demonstrate the decompression and compression speeds of both CPUs, and interestingly, although the 8550U was quite far ahead in terms of compression speeds, it was a little slower when it came to decompression. In Cinebench, I've tested both the single and multi-core performance, and as expected in the single-core test, the 8550U is out in front as the single-core was able to reach 4 GHz. Things change in the multi-core results however, as the 8550U had to downclock itself quite a bit to stay cool, resulting in the 6700HQ performing better. Interestingly, things change a bit in Geekbench 4. Although the single-core performance is slightly ahead as expected, the multi-core performance result here jumps ahead too. However, this test doesn't go for that long and doesn't really represent a sustained workload as some of the other tests better do. A similar result was observed in Passmark 9, where the single-core score of the 8550U was a fair bit ahead, while in the multi-core tests the results were much closer together. The Corona benchmark renders a scene using the CPU, and it completed about 10% quicker on the 6700HQ. Again, because the 8550U was downclocking itself under a full multi-core workload over a longer period of time. So as with the 7700HQ comparison, the results were a bit of a mixed bag, with the 8550U winning in single-core performance as expected, and in general losing in multi-core performance, at least in the tests that I'd classify as being more real-world with workloads that run for a longer period of time, rather than short synthetic tests. The single-core wins by the 8550U were expected owing to that 4 GHz turbo boost, which is higher than the 6700HQ's 3.5 GHz. And it's also just a newer chip with other architectural improvements. In practice, I found that the 8550U with all cores in use quickly thermal throttled to around 2.7 GHz on all cores, At least in this case with the Dell XPS 13, which is what I was testing with, which is quite thin and doesn't seem to be up to the job of running it flat out for longer periods of time. The Dell XPS 13 does use a 25W TDP, so the CPU is getting more power, helping it perform better compared to other Ultrabooks with the standard 15W TDP. The thin form factor does seem to limit the results though. With proper cooling, the 8550U is meant to run at 3.7 GHz on all 4 cores, making it a fair bit faster than the 6700HQ's all-core 3.1 GHz boost. As a lower power chip, it's being placed into a small laptop here, so there's not really enough thermal headroom to achieve maximum performance. There were no issues running a single core at 4 GHz with the 8550U though, which explains why it's ahead in many of the single core tests, but generally behind in multi-core. With better cooling, I suspect that the 8550U would come out on top in almost all cases. However, as a U-series chip, which is primarily going to be used in much thinner laptops, this may be unlikely. Based on these tests, in most cases the 8550U seems to offer some improvement, mainly in single-core workloads. If you're already running a laptop with a 6700HQ, there's no real reason to upgrade to the 8550U, unless perhaps you need to buy a new laptop anyway for other reasons, such as a requirement for a thinner machine, or maybe you just really want that better single-core performance. I still use my 6700HQ laptop every day and it still performs perfectly fine for me, so I'd probably only consider the change if I wanted to swap to an Ultrabook style system. I haven't tested the differences in battery performance or temperatures as both laptops have different sized batteries and different cooling solutions, so it wouldn't really be a fair comparison. For the same reason, I also haven't tested any games, as the 6700HQ laptop had an Nvidia card, while the 8550U laptop had no discrete graphics at all. So what did you guys think about the differences in performance between Intel's 6700HQ and 8550U CPUs? Although the main point of the U-series CPUs are to be lower powered and allow for thinner and lighter laptops, the fact that the 8550U was able to keep up in many cases and even beat the 6700HQ in some instances was pretty impressive. I'd be interested in seeing what the 8550U can do in a thicker laptop with better cooling, and I can't wait to test out more of the 8th gen CPUs on the channel in the future. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments and leave a like if you found the information useful. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe for future tech videos like this one.